Hi, everybody. Welcome to the December 19th edition of Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's get a quick take on President Obama's historic announcement on Wednesday that the U.S. is reopening diplomatic relations with Cuba. Patty Calhoun from Westward, this was major headlines midweek. People have been talking about it nationwide. While it doesn't have a Colorado connection, something that breaks tradition of U.S. diplomatic relations for 50 years, still merited a couple words from us. What do you think?
About time. He had said he would do it many years ago, and now he finally has. And I think it's good that we can actually get something going in this part of the world. They're our neighbors. We need to chat with them.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. A long time coming or a silly gesture?
Certainly not silly or trivial. The Castro regime's main domestic product and export has always been tyranny. The Venezuelan dictatorship is based on the Cuban secret police who go around directing mobs to attack peaceful demonstrations against the regime. President Obama is right that the 50 years of the trade embargo has not brought the regime down. I'd have more confidence that this new process would lead to something constructive in Cuba, like less tyranny, if the president implementing it had any foreign policy successes.
Penn Tate, longtime state lawmaker, attorney with Greenberg Traurig. Did this turn because of Raul Castro? Is it because Fidel was out of the picture that President Obama was able to make this, or were there other situations that made this possible?
You know, I think there are probably a number of things at play. I think part of what probably happened is with Cuba is much of what eventually happened with the Soviet Union. You start going broke long enough, hard enough, and you have to change your way of thinking. And I do believe that the economic sanctions have had an impact on Cuba to the point where they've decided this just isn't worth it. We need to change our approach to the world. So I think that's part of it. I think optically, Raul being in charge rather than Fidel has made a big difference. And I think that this is the right thing for the president to do. I do think he has foreign policy successes. I'll just say Osama bin Laden and leave it at that. But I think this is the appropriate step to take. What I think is going to be fascinating is the factions within our country, because there are a number of folks of Cuban ancestry who fled when the revolution took place in Cuba, who have very strong feelings about the U.S. and the rest of the world normalizing relations with Cuba based on their personal experiences. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Alicia Caldwell from the editorial page of the Denver Post. Wrap it up for us.
Well, we've had 50 years of isolation where Cuba is concerned. I mean, you just look at the pictures and you can see the aging cars, the decrepit streets, the crumbling infrastructure. I mean, clearly this is a society that has not been successful. You know, as for going forward, who are you going to lay your bets with? The CIA doing its subterfuge, or the internet? I think the internet is probably the stronger force, and I think that will, potentially bring about some of the liberalization that I think most of us want to see.
I think you're right. The fact that Cuba still looks like what it did in Godfather 2 is certainly paving the way. Well, let's get to it. Denver city officials announced a major redevelopment plan for the National Western Stock Show complex on Thursday. While officials have yet to name or announce projected costs of the project, the plan may run upwards of $500 million and could take up to a decade to complete. Many are comparing the size and magnitude of the proposal to the redevelopment of Stapleton and the building of DIA. Patty, this was huge. You've been following the stock show ever since you've attended, but also the whole redevelopment situation over the last couple of years. What do you make of this announcement?
Well, it's a great looking plan on paper, and if you drive around the area, you can see what it could do to revitalize that part of town, but it's very expensive. Remember how this all got started when it looked like Aurora and the Gaylord project were going to hijack the National Western, certainly the National Western Stock Show. Over 100 years old, the board was concerned. They didn't like the facilities. They wanted to leave. Denver wanted to keep it here for a variety of reasons, partly sentiment, started here 109 years ago, partly because Denver's built a lot of these buildings and we paid. We had voted to tax ourselves to do some improvements in those buildings. What we're looking at now is just huge. It's going to be at least $500 million. We're talking about many, many buildings everything will be replaced except the original arena that's a century old. It has to take 10 years because they're going to keep doing the show, and so you have to have some buildings in which you can do the show, so it's going to take 10 years to do it. The funding issue is the real one, and where's the money going to come from? Are we going to be taxed? Is it going to be some of the tourism money that is still in the state? I think they've got one more round for it. I would have been more impressed if they'd actually revealed not just the beautiful, beautiful plans, but a beautiful plan for financing them too. That's going to be the big issue. Also, the city has to buy 145 acres from private landowners. Many of those are going businesses right now, so that's going to be tricky.
David, even before this proposal was announced, this has become an epicenter of activity, future activity and plans for Denver. The I-70 project is right there. Rhino has been developing, so the prices of some of that property, while not directly with National Western Stock Show, is at least close enough by where there's been some redevelopment. Can this plan get done?
It shouldn't get done. For one thing, as you and Patty have said, there's a lot of economic movement upward right now by private businesses, not on welfare, serving their customers. And now we have some big top-down plan that's going to say, oh, let's buy all their land, get them out of business, and so we can have this top-down program that's supposedly going to make us all richer rather than the thriving businesses that exist. The money's going to come from the National Western Stock Show in part? Well, don't count on that, because when we raised our taxes in 1988 in a vote in Denver, it was, oh, we'll put in some money to upgrade the facilities, and then National Western Stock Show will take care of maintenance and improvements and all this kind of stuff. And the first part happened, we put the money in, the second part didn't. National Western Stock Show did not honor its contract, and now we're supposed to go for this huge $500 million project, which depends on them keeping their word and putting the money in they promised they will. And then who's going to manage this? Mayor Michael Hancock? That guy can't run the county jail. And you want him to run a $500 million economic redevelopment project? We don't have the governmental competence in this city right now to take on something like this, which would be a bad idea, even if it could be done competently.
Well, we won't count David as a fan of the project then, but
He doesn't have strong feelings about this at all. So, yeah.
So you're coming from that lukewarm response. If it is going to happen, whether it's funded or not, privately, taxpayers, whatever it is, it's certainly going to take 10 years, if not more. Probably several mayors would be involved. But it's still a pretty fierce uphill climb for an event that is near and dear to Denver's heart for 3 weeks a year. How do they pull it off?
I think that's the crux of this issue, and I think both David and Patty make good points. From an emotional point of view, the state connects with the stock show. From an economic point of view, the state has not connected with the stock show for a long time, which is why we have this situation. I think it's right for the city, in conjunction with the National Western and Colorado State University, we ought to add. It's right for them to sit down, take a look at the current situation, and talk about what could be. As Patty said, put together a beautiful plan, but as we all know, plans are irrelevant if you can't pay for it. So the next hurdle that needs to be crossed is, how do you pay for it? But my hope is, in part of this vetting process, we have a real honest conversation about, do we want it, do we need it, will we as a community sustain it? Because of its location, because of the I-70 East Corridor project, and I think the growing concern and conversation about whether I-70 East ought to happen just the way it is, or whether the 270 bypass makes the most sense, which will most assuredly impact whatever you do at the National Western, there needs to be a broader conversation. And we've talked about this on the show before, when I was in the legislature, we often talked about the fact that the stock show and the state fair were on opposite sides of the same coin, where emotionally as a state, we connect to them, they reflect a certain part of the heritage of the state, but as a state, we don't necessarily economically support them to extent required so that they can be self-sufficient. That's going to be the fundamental conversation that takes place here, because I think David's right. People may bristle at another subsidized project like this if it's not supported otherwise.
Alicia, some experts have pointed to the fact that this looks a lot like the major projects in the past, like the redevelopment of Stapleton and Denver International Airport. Each of those had a pretty strong leadership and support to make it happen. It really needed someone to really be the midwife to make sure it happened. Do you think someone wants to step up, besides Mayor Hancock, to be that person and make sure this happens with the political risk involved?
You're absolutely right. That does need to happen, because I don't think there is a banner person or a banner cause, so to speak. With the airport, it's obvious. With Stapleton, it's housing. But with this, it's what is this really about? My understanding is after the 3 weeks of the stock show is over, we're talking about horse shows. Which apparently raise a lot of money, but do we really want to put taxpayer money into creating a venue for wealthy equestrians? Not sure. The other piece is the Coliseum, which is concerts and other entertainment shows, and not against that. It's fun, it's good, but will it compete with other city venues? Now they have studies that say that it won't, but common sense says that it will. The other thing that concerns me about the project as a whole is, I worry about the Disneyfication of it, so to speak. You go to the stock show, you come back with dung on your shoes, and I'm just not sure that's going to happen anymore. I think it seems like it's going to be really cleaned up and maybe sterile and maybe not the same. It doesn't have to be exactly the way it was, but gee, I hope it stays kind of close.
Still want to come up with something a little bit more on your shoes. I get you. It's an acquired taste, but I get you. Nebraska, speaking of things in your shoes, Nebraska and Oklahoma have filed a lawsuit against Colorado with the U.S. Supreme Court relating to its legalization of marijuana. The states are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to rule Amendment 64 unconstitutional, claiming it causes costly problems in neighboring states. David, this I know personally just shocked me, and I don't know the legal side, which I'm hoping you and Penn can both help us out with. But just on the common sense side, this seemed to not pass that test for me. Where are you at with it?
Well, the lawsuit is filed in the United States Supreme Court because the Constitution gives the Supreme Court original jurisdiction over suits between states. Typically what happens is the Supreme Court will appoint a special master to hear the case. So for example, in the decades-long water rights case of Kansas versus Colorado, you have not had the lawyers come back before the 9 justices all the time to say, oh, here's the motion about the discovery we want to conduct or whatever. It's not I read the complaint, and kudos to the Denver Post, which does a really good job of, these days in legal cases, of putting some of the key documents on the website for people to read. The complaint is the Controlled Substances Act, a federal statute, outlaws the production and manufacture and sale of marijuana. The lawsuit is against not the fact that Colorado removed its criminal control, its own criminal restrictions on possession of marijuana, but that Colorado, under Amendment 64, is affirmatively setting up a regulated system for production and sale, and they say that is in conflict with the federal statute. It's preempted by it. The one difficulty of their suit is if that's correct, it's not just Colorado or Washington State, it's 23 states that have also set up, in some sense, regulatory systems for the production and sale of marijuana through legal medical marijuana, not to mention the District of Columbia and Guam. I would say on the common sense side, I'd agree that you live in a federal system. That's one of the beauties of ours, that we don't have to all be the same. And do people illegally export from Colorado to neighboring states? Yes, but that doesn't mean the neighboring state has to revert to prohibition. That's what we saw with alcohol prohibition. Oklahoma's 1907 Constitution was to make the state bone dry, as they put it. It was already pretty dry, naturally. And they repealed beer prohibition in 1934, didn't repeal liquor prohibition until 1957. And of course, the fact that those things were legal in Colorado made it more difficult to enforce prohibition in Oklahoma, but that's the nature of 50 sovereign states.
Penn, for me, the common sense test failed because they pointed to that it was costing so much to prosecute cases in marijuana and all the money that they were spending doing that. Then I realized that both Colorado and the federal government have decided that they have flexibility of where they place the priority of how they look at these cases. It seemed to me that, well, if I'm spending too much money prosecuting marijuana, and you're draining my budget, I can decide to lower that priority. Am I crazy in thinking that?
No, I think there are a couple things going on. One question that's out there, and David may know the answer, I haven't found the answer yet, is although it was a direct filing with the U.S. Supreme Court, I'm not certain if the Supreme Court has to take jurisdiction over the matter if this is a discretionary grant. I'm not certain about that. I think there is some benefit to the court hearing the case and dealing with it because it may resolve this question finally. But call me a cynic, and I will be on this topic. I think the issue is far more basic. I think Oklahoma and Nebraska are just looking for cash payments from Colorado and other states, claiming that it's costing us money to do our jobs based on the legal structure we have in our states. And so since we don't like what you've done, give us a bag of money to help offset some of the pain and misery. I won't quite call it extortion, but let's call it a legal request for financial contribution to assist in the political choices Nebraska and Oklahoma have made. I think it's a little more than that. So it'll be interesting to see how the court treats it.
I agree with that point. And Alicia, it seems to me that politically it's a big misstep because we're the state of Colorado and we have John Hickenlooper as governor, just reelected. For better or for worse, he is a man who loves to make people happy and loves to make deals. If you really had a problem with things coming from Colorado to Oklahoma, Nebraska, come sit down with John Hickenlooper. I got to believe he would try to make a deal and try to make people happy. What do you think about this approach?
Well, I think ultimately, I don't think John Hickenlooper is going to agree to pay these states money for what's happening in their states. That's and ultimately it's ending up in John Suther's, the other John Suther's office. And I'm following Seabiscuit and Secretariat here on the law, but it strikes me that the crux of the rejoinder here is that this is prosecutorial discretion on the part of the feds. And just if that sounds familiar, think back just a few weeks to the president's announcement on immigration and how he decided that in which ways to focus resources when it came to deporting people and enforcing immigration laws. And this is somewhat similar in that case, and in that sense. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of legal traction, and with that, I think there will also not be nearly as much political traction either.
Patty, you've written a page or two on the issue of pot. So what do you think of the lawsuit and where it's going to go?
Well, I may not be an attorney, but I know felony's stupid. This is such a stupid lawsuit on so many levels. First of all, who is asking Nebraska to pull over every Colorado car that drives across the border? It's not like they are the bosses of the world. I mean, they are not supposed to have to shake down everybody who comes from Colorado. Don't know where they started it. They could stop. They could maybe just pull over the people who are speeding. They could pull over the people who they have a reason to pull over the way they have for decades. So that they say they're so badly affected, there is no real proof that they have suffered harm through this. So I did consult an attorney, Doug Friednash, former city attorney, who now, because of his experience in the city, is doing a lot of consulting on pot cases. And he said he thinks this one, they don't have standing and it'll get thrown out. But in the meantime, we get to make so much fun of Nebraska and Oklahoma, and that is always good.
Since they left the football conference, I've really missed this opportunity. So this is great. I do agree with that. Denver City Council members approved a bill on Monday that could ultimately place more controversial red light cameras throughout the city. The bill extends private contracts for companies that currently manage the cameras in photo radar speed vans. Penn, these are very unpopular among the public, but the police say that they are increasing safety, and city officials love the $34 million that have come in the last 5 years. Is the expansion inevitable?
I think the expansion is inevitable, but I don't think it's inevitable for safety reasons, which is the unfortunate piece here. I think the city's made it clear that their primary motivation is generating revenue, which seems to be counterintuitive. You want to serve and protect, you want to keep people safe. The idea is not to do a got you and collect a bunch of $25 speeding tickets from folks, but that's what they're going to do. The other problem, as Councilwoman Jeannie Fotz pointed out in the hearing, is there are some flaws with the red light cameras in terms of some false positives. We're depending on what's going on, where you stop, how you stop. It may photograph you as having run the red light when you haven't really run the light at all. So they've got some technical issues to figure out as well.
Alicia, if the city doesn't handle this right, do you think there's going to be more populist movements like we saw in the state legislature last year to try to ban the programs altogether?
Oh yeah, I'm sure that'll come back around. People just email me randomly sometimes about the red light cameras. They're so mad about it. In the last year or so, I took a deeper dive on this issue as I was writing about it. And one of the things that struck me in reading some of the research is that dangerous intersections where a lot of these traffic tickets happen, typically are dangerous for a reason, a structural reason. Bad geometry, the yellow light's too short. I don't think you're really going to change the nature of an intersection with a camera. You're going to make people a little more jittery, but I think those underlying issues need to be addressed first. And if it's really about safety, why not lower the fines? That's just never going to happen. This isn't about, as Penn said, this is about raising money, and I think it's pretty transparent to people, and that's what makes them angry.
Patty, do you think the city is going to adapt it to try to make it a little bit more palatable to citizens or not?
Well, it would be nice if they reduced the fine, but they're not going to, because the point is this is a fundraising opportunity for them. And there's still going to be problems, but they're not going to fix them. I think we will see the legislature maybe jump in again, because people really, really hate this. They can't find it, and it's not making them any safer.
David, wrap it up for us.
The studies from around the country about whether it does make things safer are mixed at best. As said, it's not for safety, it's for revenue, and it's also taken us another step in the wrong direction of being this panopticon of having the citizens under constant photo surveillance all the time.
Well, let's get to the very favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. As always, Ms. Calhoun, start us off.
Well, because of the nice holiday season we have coming up, I'm going to give it to, and I may be mispronouncing this name, Greg Gang at the DIA, worker there, who just happened to find some Walmart gift cards that happened to maybe have fallen out of a suitcase from a woman who was visiting Colorado, and then happened to go spend them within the next hour at an Aurora Walmart. Just what a Scrooge. Let's all be a little nicer this holiday season, and if you happen to find someone's Walmart gift cards that happen to have fallen out of the suitcase while you were inspecting the suitcase, maybe you should turn them into the lost and found.
David.
Paramount Pictures, which refused to allow theaters to show the movie Team America World Police about puppets who fight the North Korean mass murdering tyrant the Kim family, as a replacement for the movie that Sony Pictures wussed out on and won't release at all, not even with video on demand.
I could not agree more. That capitulation was just absolutely stunning on both sides. Penn.
The capitulation. I think it sends a very poor message to tyrannical forces around the world. And I think it does disservice to the actors who participated and created the film, the directors, and to the movie-going public, because we've always prided ourselves in each moviegoer deciding what movie they want to see and writing their own reviews based on what they felt. This is a disturbing trend, and I do think it's a trend because I don't think this is going to be the last time it occurs, and it's unfortunate that Sony caved like this.
Sally, I think you're absolutely right. Alicia.
Make it 3. Who knows what Kim Jong-un is going to try next time? I mean, that's something we can look forward to, I guess, in the new year.
Exactly. I hope he's still an Avengers fan, or that whole franchise will fall on his face. Say something nice about somebody, Patty. What do you think?
Well, and in the meantime, aren't we all writing much nicer emails, having read some of those Sony ones? I'm going to say something nice about Helen Thorpe, the Colorado author whose Soldier Girls was picked by Time Magazine as the best nonfiction book of the year. If you want to understand what it's like for people who are going to go fight our wars, read that book.
David.
Well, we in America worry that the worst thing that could happen at Christmas is Uncle Fred's going to drink from the punch bowl too much and put a lampshade on his head. Christians in countries like Nigeria, Iraq, Syria, Pakistan risk their lives every day, and when they go to Christmas Mass on December 24th or 25th, they know they're taking a genuine risk of being mass murdered, and they have a lot of courage for going forward.
Here. Penn.
Mine's related to David's. It caught my attention on the news this week to watch the number and variety of different holiday celebrations for folks of different faiths that a number of people in Denver and in Colorado participate in, even though it may not be their particular faith. So it gives you hope that as a society we're heading down the right path, despite some of the other things going on in the world.
It's a hopeful season. Alicia.
Congress, surprisingly.
I'm sorry, say that again? You say Congress?
For passing the Hermosa Creek Protection Act. It's a special place. This is a raft of protections that were created by people in the Durango area, in the Four Corners area. I didn't think it was going to pass. Somehow they managed to get it through. It's a Christmas miracle.
Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. Well, I will add that to Say Something Nice. All the folks out there, the fans we've heard from throughout the year that really make this show possible, the folks that follow us on Twitter, the folks that always chime in, see us in the public. It's always exciting to find and meet the viewers that make this show possible, and we're grateful for all of your support. That is all the time we have tonight. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please be sure to tune in next week. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss this, when we offer our annual Year in Review show, looking back at all the major issues we talked about this year. It is also our annual Christmas sweater show, and if just tuning in for Eric Sonderman's sweater, that will be worth it. You have to trust me on this one. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for watching. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we will see you next week.